Okay, we are live. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Clay Olson, and I've got with us Jason Carroll. And we're going to be talking about the breaking down the myth of pornography. We're really lucky to have Jason. We're really excited. But before we introduce Jason and kind of get into this, we want to say thank you for joining us on our flagship webinar. Thanks for joining us on this first experience, and we hope you're enjoying Fortify. It's only going to get better from here. We've got a lot of things planned, and we're really excited about it. While we're doing this, so while you're watching this, feel free to ask questions. That's the point of a live webinar. We want to hear from you. Jason's here with us for the next hour, and we want to pick his brain with whatever questions you might have. And so feel free to just in the comment section, just ask whatever question that you might have, as well as let us know, about you. If you're coming from all over the world, we know that many of you are watching from all over the world right now, and some of you are, it's early morning or late at night, but we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. So, Jason, let me introduce you a little bit for everybody. I want to set the stage because Jason is, we're lucky to have him. Let me read something about Jason. So Dr. Jason Carroll is a professor in the School of Family Life at Brigham Young University and a fellow at the Wheatley Institute. Dr. Carroll is an internationally recognized researcher and educator in the areas of sexual intimacy and marriage readiness among young adults. He has also published several studies, hundreds of studies, on the effects of pornography on couple relationships. And in fact, Jason, in 2014, you were actually awarded the International Mid-Career Achievement Award. Is that right? From the International Association of Research. Is that correct?
Yeah, the international body that does the relationship research. So you push along long enough, wondering if anybody pays attention. So yeah, that was nice.
Awesome. Well, okay, Jason, we're going to be talking today about the breaking down of the myth of pornography, something that I know our viewers are definitely interested in understanding more and more clearly. So walk us through what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, what I'm hoping is we'll lay a little bit of a foundation as we get started, and that's going to help us have some deeper conversation and get into some more specifics a little bit later. So the main thing I want us to, I think will be helpful to talk about is what's the difference between standing for something versus standing against something when it comes to struggles with pornography. So let's talk a little bit about that, and that really gets us talking about healthy sexuality. What are we standing for? Not just what are we standing against. Then we'll be able to talk with some of that conversation. We'll be able to talk more about what are the myths of pornography. How do we see it for what it really is rather than what it's pretending to be? And then I hope towards the end we can talk a little bit more about what can we actually do. What are some specific things that recognizing the myth of pornography people can do to help themselves in their struggle or to help people that they're working with or trying to help, so that we come away with some specific things of how to purge the urge, not just kind of fight the attraction, but how do we actually get that attraction to lessen and go down? A nicotine patch for pornography is kind of what we get.
Okay, I'm excited. Those are three very important kind of topics of discussion. So let's dive into the first one. Tell me what you mean when you say standing for something rather than against something, and the importance of that.
Okay, and let's put in a key idea here as we get started, right? The absence of negative is not the same as the presence of positive. Let's say that one more time just so it doesn't go past us, right? The absence of negative is not the same as the presence of positive. So while we can talk about the harms of pornography and the things that pornography can do that harm individuals, harm couples, that's still not the same as saying, so what's the positive? What's the good thing, the positive things that we should be having as well? So the more we get a vision about healthy sexuality, the more we're moving towards something, not just trying to move away from something.
Good point. Love that.
So part of the starting point is actually to reflect for each of us, what is it we've learned about sexuality? How did we learn about sexuality? I mean, Clay, go back and think for yourself. Do you remember a sex education component of maybe a high school health class or something like that you experienced?
Yeah, very sadly. Yeah, I remember too much probably.
Yeah, most of us remember a really, awkward maturation program somewhere along the way in school, maybe embarrassed parents or someone at our church that had to, got the short straw that had to teach the kids about it. But if you think about it, think about the time that we live in today. The rising generation today is what we could call the safe sex generation. So what they've been mostly taught and what most of us were taught growing up about sexuality was safe sex, right? So the dominant message was, here's how you avoid getting pregnant, and here's how you avoid getting a sexually transmitted disease, right? And if you could accomplish those two things, you've now learned about safe sex, and that was really the message. And we put it in a health class, and we try to teach it as a health issue. So you can start to see right from the get-go that many of us grow up with a pretty thin vision, a pretty thin view of what sexuality is and what it can
Which is why we're so vulnerable when we are introduced to something like pornography. We can be so swayed, so easily swayed, because we really don't know the context. Is that right?
Perfect. And then, so pornography comes into the scene, so to speak, and it fits. It fits with this kind of view and vision, and it really doesn't get challenged very much. So let me back us up a little bit. If we go all the way back into the 1960s, when researchers started doing research on sexuality, it was a pretty new and novel thing at the time. And you might remember this even from a high school health class, right? Have you ever been, we often teach the human sexual response cycle, right? And that's what the researchers in the 60s focused on. They started breaking down the sexual response of humans into this cycle. And they said that it had these phases to it, right? That there was a desire phase, followed by an arousal phase, followed by an orgasm phase, followed by a resolution phase. It was all biologically defined. It's all about body responses and what's happening to someone physically. Okay. So when you have that, you start to get what is fragmented. That's what I'd call a fragmented view of sexuality. It's just the physical. There's no emotional, there's no meaning to it. And then the really problematic approach is then we talk about a person going through those phases, how they experience desire, and then they experience arousal, and then they experience through this cycle. But now look, notice what we just did. We made sexuality physical only, and we talk about one person experiencing it. What we actually started doing in the 1960s, we actually created the human sexual response cycle of pornography, is what we did. It fits perfectly with pornography. There's one person present, and it's a physically fragmented.
That's kind of looking at that one kind of experience, but that's not nearly what the full kind of what healthy sexuality ought to look like or be defined as.
Yeah. So we want to change that, right? The vision we have to have, the thing that sets humans apart from all other species, is the ability we have to connect to sexual experience, deep meaning, and intimacy. To connect as whole people, not simply just to connect our bodies or to connect in physical touch. Dr. David Schnarch in Colorado.
That's a great
one of my favorite names. Schnarch, right? But David's work has been revolutionary, and he has emphasized that human capacity for intimacy is really the profound, meaningful part. And that's, I think, the sad thing. The minute you start saying sexuality is something you talk about in a health class, well, we never had a relationships class, right? We never had a life preparations class. But we all know this. Think about, right? And I invite all the listeners to think about relationship experiences they have. I mean, we're all familiar with. All the TV sitcoms talk about relationship drama, right? It's all about the drama, the ups and downs. This is very emotional, right? We're connected to this in our efforts to bond, to attach. So really, instead of a fragmented view, what we have to start having is a vision of what I would use the term of wholeness, sexual wholeness. And the only way we can do that is if we acknowledge first and foremost who we are as sexual beings, who we are as humans. And so our nature isn't just physical, right? It is also one of emotion and deep connection. But I would also add to that a dimension of meaning, that we're seeking for meaning and purpose in our lives. And sexuality is no different. It can become something that's kind of a casual, means nothing type of meaning, or something that we want to tie to deep relationships that mean a lot to us, and we share ourselves in deep, profound ways. And for many people, that ties even to hopes for lifelong relationships, to families, to having children, all of these types of things that can be tied to that type of romantic sexual bond when people tie it into a relationship.
And that's really interesting, because that really requires us to redefine, for the majority of individuals out there, we have to redefine what we mean by sexuality and what happy sexuality is. Like you're saying, so often we've defined it from a physical standpoint only. And this piece is, it kind of challenges that, but it also feels so much more natural. Like, as you define that, you're like, obviously that is how we ought to be looking at healthy sexuality and the sexual wholeness. So I love what you're saying.
One of the ways to capture that, Clay, that fits what you're saying there is the idea that it's helpful to think about sexuality as a means, not an end. Right? So it's not the end in and of itself. We don't express ourselves sexually. We don't have sex simply for the sake of having sex, right? It's to what purposes? What do we want it to be? Yes, for physical pleasure, that's a purpose and a worthwhile purpose, but also to express ourselves emotionally, to show love, to show affection, so when we start thinking about meanings and purposes of sexuality, then we think of it quite differently. Think for a minute. Let's back up even with these ideas. So we go back to that human sexual response cycle that we're shown in a high school health class or in sexuality education. Notice now what you have to change. Yes, our bodies go through and have the ability to experience the kind of physical phases of sexual response. But now you have to draw two lines, not one line, right? It's two people sharing this with each other. And they don't go through the phases simultaneously. Ask anybody in a long-term relationship, right? They don't go through them simultaneously. It takes responsiveness. It takes awareness, not just awareness of your own experience, but the awareness of your partner and the person you're with. And so the only way you're going to have a mutually satisfying, loving, bonding experience is when people are trying to think of the other as much as they think of themselves. And so that's a very, very different way to think about, rather than a sexually fragmented, selfish kind of approach that's only looking at my personal physical response as the gauge of the sexual experience.
So I have two questions. And the first one, talk to our viewers who are not yet married, perhaps some of our teenage audience, some of our young adult audience that are dating. When we talk about sexuality, we're not, there's the emotional bond, of course, within intimacy, but we're not just talking about inside of a sexual experience per se, or is defined as kind of a sexual intercourse, but it's far broader than that, right?
No, I love that question, right? I teach the relationship preparation courses at my university. So I teach the big auditoriums with all the young adults, right? And we get into the dating units and we talk about dating and patterns. One of the favorite questions I get, most common questions is, Dr. Carroll, how soon should you kiss somebody, right? When is the right timing for that? And I always ask them to turn their question around and say, instead of focusing on the when of the kiss. Maybe the better question is, why should you kiss? Right? What's the meaning? What's the pattern? So you make a really great point there, Clay. While we're using the term sexuality, we should make sure that we do think of this in very broad terms, right? How many times have people gone on a date and somebody held their hand, somebody didn't hold their hand, or something like that happens? And then they get home, they're with their roommates, they're talking to their sister or whoever, and the big question always comes up: what did that mean? Now, you're always having the conversation with the wrong people. That's a webinar for another time. Of why are you asking the third parties, what did it mean? The only person who can really tell you what it means is the person who did or didn't do that. But think about that. Think about the symbols and the meaning we give to even holding hands, or someone calling you after a date, or someone coming over to talk to you and be with you. We're always interpreting the symbols. We're always interpreting what these things mean in relationships. And so, yes, this wholeness, we can be just as much about, are we whole? Are we tying into the emotional and meaning dimensions of all of the ways we share ourselves physically, emotionally, as we build a relationship with each other?
Yes, absolutely. So here's my next question. You talked about bonding. And you know, when we look at the neuroscience, one of the chemicals that are released inside the reward pathway as arousal hits and as intimacy takes you know, as climax is reached, oxytocin is that chemical. Talk about oxytocin and its role with relationships.
Now, first off, Clay, what a perfect question, right? Great insight here, because this idea of sexual wholeness, it's not just an idea, it's not just a phrase, it's literally who we are, right? It's in the very way that our bodies and our brains function, right? The evolutionary psychologists would use the term pair bonding creatures, that we are pair bonding creatures as humans. We are hardwired to connect. Not just hardwired to have sex, not just hardwired to experience pleasure. We are hardwired to connect and to bond, right? So your question's perfect, right? So we literally have learned in recent years with the MRI technologies that when people become romantically attached and when they share themselves physically with each other, that it does trigger the brain chemistry. The sexual response begins in the brain. It doesn't begin in other parts of our bodies. The rest of our body responds to the brain, not the other way around. So when that dopamine cascade comes through the brain, that's the pleasure response. When the oxytocin cascade comes through the brain, that's the attachment and bonding, right? It literally shows us how much that we are hardwired to connect. It's a very similar oxytocin cascade to when we see women who nurse their babies, right? And an attachment bonding type of experience as well. So this whole idea of sexual wholeness is literally in our bodies. It's not just in our minds. It's not just a psychological concept, I guess what I'm saying. It's literally our nature. It's who we are as humans. So that's why pornography is inherently a form of sexual fragmentation, because it doesn't acknowledge this wholeness. It doesn't acknowledge this fullness that we have as humans.
Okay. And so as we connect and as we bond to a computer screen, because oxytocin is being released even while watching pornography, as we bond to that continuously, is that having any lasting effects?
Well, what it's doing is it's starting to take that response and it's starting to connect it to different things, right? And that's where we can start to talk here a bit about the myths of pornography, because this all sets it up to where pornography starts to give us. It not only builds on the insufficient teaching of sexuality, it adds to it. Pornography is a really, really bad form of sex education.
Yeah.
If you want to educate children and teens and young adults to really, really be not prepared for full sexual relationships later in life, show them porn. It just doesn't give us that view. So really, as we move over to the myths of pornography, one last thing. So what I would highlight, and you talked about our young viewers and maybe teenagers and young adults, the vision I would encourage them to have to say, so what is it I'm preparing for? If you're looking to have sexual wholeness in a later relationship, what you're preparing yourself for is, one, to make sure that the body and the physical and the emotional is always connected. Make sure there's always emotion that is connected and congruent. Two, you need union between the two people, right? You need to have a connection between the partners. So it's a unity between the physical and the emotional. It's a union between the two people. Well, I think if we can move to the second thing that I was hoping we would talk about today, is that when we start to have a deeper awareness of what it means, the sexual wholeness idea that we talked about, we can better understand the myths of pornography and how pornography doesn't even begin to match up to. So, for example, I would bet that many of our viewers, and definitely those that are familiar with the Fortify curriculum and have spent time in the program, right, have heard about this idea of objectification, what it means to objectify somebody, right? But let's think about that in the relationship context. What happens if you get used to using pornography and constantly objectifying people? You only know them as bodies. You only see their body parts. You only see, right? You don't know their names. You don't know anything more about them. Look at what that does to you in a relationship setup and context. Now you're developing what I would call a trait-based attraction, right? You're attracted to traits, not people. Whole-centered, okay, right? Other-centered love, whole person love is very different than being attracted to traits, okay? Now, the scary thing is, depending on how old somebody is, this one makes a lot of sense to them, right? So if my wife had many years ago had said, you know, Jason, the thing I love most about you is your thick, curly hair, right? Well, what happens then? Traits don't always stay the same now, do they? Right? So if her love and attraction to me was fully about, say, the trait of my hair, or, you know, as we age, traits can often change.
We can gain weight.
We can gain weight. Wrinkles can show up. We can, right?
Get into a wheelchair. Yeah.
Yeah, all sorts of things. So if all we develop is an attraction to traits, one of the big myths of pornography, one of the threats of pornography, is it gets us to develop a trait-based attraction. And the problem is, someone who has the trait to a higher degree can always be around the next corner. And our love to a partner, to someone we pledge ourselves to, someone that we want to be committed to, can always be in danger of somebody else coming along with the greater trait.
Which we see all the time, right? We see this all the time in the media, right?
Well, effect on us as well. We all live in the social media world, the marketing world, you know, and all of it is everybody sharing their highlight pictures, right? And sharing their best and sharing their. So pornography does this, and it takes it to a huge extreme that we start to be attracted to traits. And we can't say that we're attracted to the whole person because we don't know the whole person. But pornography wants to give us the myth that this is the same. And even the myth that maybe it'll help us in our real relationships when we do this. This is tied to another one of the myths of pornography, one of the threats of pornography, which is unrealistic expectations, right? If you start to learn about what happens inside of the creation of pornography, you start to realize how much it provides it literally is pretending, right? It is pretending for this to happen. It's a little bit like, not quite as popular now, but it's still around, right? It's like professional wrestling, right? Now, when I was growing up, people would literally sit and argue whether or not professional wrestling was real, right? They've kind of stopped pretending that now, right? But can you imagine someone sitting there telling you, it's real, I know it's real. It's like, no, it's not, right? So it just gets very unrealistic.
Yeah, that was before all the reality TV. Now that we know things are fake. That was back in the day when it was kind of the first reality TV show.
And so now they just admit to it that it's just, they call it some sort of drama, and then a fighting's come along and it's real, but no one thinks that this is right. Simply,
really, because one argument that we get is people kind of look at this and say, well, I know it's fake, I know they're actors, but that doesn't mean that the pleasure that they're experiencing is fake. And we're like,
well,
once to be sure that the standard and kind of average scene takes about 3 or 4 days to film.
Exactly. Nice one. Yeah.
I thought it was all taking place in a 5-minute time period, and it's like, no, right? It is fake. Even that part of it is fake.
Great way for me to share this with our viewers. In my counseling work as a marriage therapist, I worked with many couples, right? Many maybe young couples that have just got married or something, and they're worried that their intimacy isn't what it's supposed to be because it doesn't match what many of them have learned through pornography over the years, right? I've had a number of young husbands, for example, completely surprised when they learn that a 30-minute pornography video is shot over 3 days. And it's shown to them as if it is continuous, right, action, but it's not. And so you're saying you're starting to believe in things that just simply aren't the case. And of course, we know that it's airbrushed and it's lighted and it's edited. It's what happens is real life relationships with real people, if we're not careful, they just become kind of bad porn, right? Just something that, I would just move on from that when I'm searching through pornography. Person that hasn't been surgically altered, hasn't been airbrushed, hasn't been tanned, hasn't been edited, hasn't been just
has to get up early in the morning, has in-laws, it's that time of the month, all these real life scenarios that don't apply to pornography.
Just don't apply, right?
Interested.
And when couples then get into stages like being married and raising kids, I mean, the 4-year-old just never knocks on the bedroom door in the middle of pornography, right? It just doesn't happen.
Hope not.
But couples making intimacy work in the real world, they do that. But they're sharing something so much more than just the physical of that moment. In fact, for couples with a rich, full relationship that have learned to communicate, to take care of each other emotionally, the physical becomes a symbol of that, right? They draw deep pleasure. And back to your comment earlier, Clay, we're actually learning that your brain response to sexual arousal is stronger when it's connected to the emotion and to the full relationship. Okay? Always remember the brain.
I want our listeners to hear that again. Repeat that. Repeat that.
Let me back up a little bit, and I'll give us even a standing for it. When we see something, right? Sometimes we just talk about we see something and our brain reacts. Always make sure that in the middle of that, it doesn't just go from seeing to brain reaction. It goes from seeing to interpreting to brain reaction. We have to make sense of it. We have to say, hey, is that desirable, not desirable? Is that good or is that bad, right? And so what happens is when you have a strong emotional bond with somebody, when you have a real relationship, you actually allow your brain to interpret your intimacy with them in stronger, more powerful ways. You can actually have greater physical reaction, arousal, and response because you're not sitting here thinking about, does this person really care about me? Is this person even know who I am? Is this person going to call me in the morning? Is this person going to, right? When you have the casual, uncommitted context of things, and pornography shares that, you often very much get a pattern. So we can literally heighten what we experience physically if we have a better base emotionally.
That's huge. I mean, I hope everyone's hearing that. That's huge. Like sometimes, and there's even one of our Fortified videos that talks about this, the fact that like sometimes you feel like you have to, like pornography is on this pedestal of experience and it's a higher standard of experience, and real life is less than that. We buy into that narrative that real life is less than that, and that in order to kind of get rid of this, I'm going to be a martyr for my relationship, and I'll take the sacrifice and I'll let go of something that I really want to then have this lesser experience. And that's not true at all, right?
And that's why when people claim, like you're saying, that somehow I know it's a myth, it's not impacting me, the research findings that we see that show people being less satisfied, pornography users being less satisfied with their relationships and less satisfied with their intimacy in their relationships, it shows us that people are clearly not doing a good job of distinguishing between this being a myth versus what is real. And that's particularly true of children. So when we get early exposure and kids get involved with pornography, they're 11, 12, 13 years old, maybe even younger, they definitely don't know the difference. They can't see through those myths, and they do think they should see that.
You're saying even if they acknowledge, like even if they verbally state, I know it's fake, the response is suggesting that their brain isn't fully, responding, wouldn't suggest that they do fully know that it's fake, because I've read the same research that you have, and we are now seeing over 40 studies, peer-reviewed academic studies, suggesting that individuals that consume pornography on a regular basis experience a significant decrease in their satisfaction with real connectivity and real relationships.
You're setting us up, Clay. We won't quite go to it yet because I got two more things we'll hit, but you're setting us up for a later conversation. If someone truly recognizes that it's not real, then they won't be attracted to it. They won't see, it won't even be arousing to them because you'll know that it's not real. As long as you allow yourself to get into it and be aroused by it, you are engaging in it in some way.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Do you want to go to there now, or do you want to come to that?
Let me hit two things too. Okay. Let's just hit two more myths of pornography. So first off, the other thing that I think that pornography really sets people up for is this idea of training their arousal template to novelty, right? People who start viewing pornography, they view it frequently, they view it over multiple years. They literally start to get to where they start to seek out something that's novel, something that's different, right?
Right. Define novel, meaning new.
So novel being just something, it's new, it's different. I have to see something that's unique. It's a different body type. It's a different person. It's a different setting. It's a different situation. The problem with that is the polar opposite of healthy relationships being based on a sense of permanence, a sense of enduring trust, a sense of enduring commitment. So you can get yourself actually, so think about what we're talking about. People getting attracted to traits, people being attracted to novelty and change, people having unrealistic expectations. They just start to set up a recipe for where a real life, lasting, committed relationship is the opposite. Again, like I said, it's really bad sex education. Porn is really bad education if somebody wants to have an enduring relationship with a real human, whole human being.
You said something to me once, Jason, in a previous conversation. Jason and I have been friends for a long time. He's been a mentor in a lot of ways on understanding this issue. But Jason, you said something to me a long time ago that pornography, and we actually embedded some of this into a video of Fortify, but pornography is a tested, proven way to make you a bad lover.
No, it's you. If you wanted to say, I'm going to put together a course. Come take my 12-week course on how to be a really, really bad lover, right? It would be heavily based in porn. And this unit would be the unit on being selfish, and this is the unit of being critical of your partner's body, and this is being critical of it really doesn't give you a sense of real intimacy, full life, whole people intimacy.
Which is the opposite message that it tries to actually sell, right?
Well, that's
that it will make you a better lover.
Yeah, one of the most discouraging things, I think, or one of the most pretending false ideas of the pornography industry in recent years, as we know they've been trying to attract more female viewers. And right? It's a stated industry goal right now is to get more women to view pornography. And one of their main sales pitches is to try to pitch to women that viewing pornography, viewing it with your partner, is a way to strengthen your relationship. It'll give you kind of this spice things up. It'll give you this kind of romance spark type of things. But again, couples don't need to turn out of their relationship for that. They need to turn in, find that within each other. And yeah, every relationship needs creativity, needs passion and frequency of that part of the relationship. But it's not going to happen with trust me, the pornography industry is not really interested in the success of your relationships. In fact, the more people are isolated, lonely, and depressed, the more pornography they view, and vice versa. So the pornography industry is pretty happy when folks are not having relationship success. It makes them better customers.
Okay, interesting. I love it. So you had one other thing, and then you were going to jump into that other.
Well, the last thing we just got to realize too is that too many people, the real myth of pornography is that it's a way to manage your moods, right? And that you turn to it when you're feeling down, you feel discouraged, you feel overwhelmed. This happens for many people who really feel like they've got a deep pornography habit. They're trying to get away from it, but they keep going back. Many of people in that context, it's because they've started turning to pornography to try to manage their moods, to try to soothe, to try to feel better. Sometimes we use the phrase self-medicate when somebody does this with smoking or drinking or other types of behaviors. But the same can be done with pornography, that it's an escapism. We turn inside of ourselves and we isolate ourselves and try to manage our emotions rather than turning to people around us. So it's another way that pornography doesn't really help us engage with others and build real life support networks. We try to turn inward, and we always learn in time how hollow pornography is as a friend. It's not a very good friend. It kind of takes from us what it wants, and it doesn't really give us what we truly need.
So before we move on, I love everything you're saying. This is so good. I hope that the listeners are soaking this in. But we've talked about what pornography can do, and a lot of the listeners are like, yep, I get it. No, that's me. That's my life. I've experienced that. I'm on board. What practical suggestions would we give to help those that are in agreement with things that we've been talking about? What would you say? What advice would you give for them to help them move in a better direction, more healthy direction?
Well, my first thing is I put in my little plug here is I would, I jump in with a deep full curriculum like the Fortify program, right? I mean, Fortify, there's just so much more than we can do here in a few minutes. But let's turn to the practical, right? Because one of the things I hear with people I work with that are struggling with pornography, and maybe you've heard this over the years, Clay, they'll say something like, I wish there was a nicotine patch for pornography. Right? So people that are trying to kick a smoking habit, they're trying to get away from smoking. So they put the nicotine patch on their arm and it helps them kind of with their urges. And I think they're on to something. I think there's something really helpful to start thinking about how do you address the urge? The one thing I can promise all of our viewers today is that the approach to beating pornography is the white knuckle approach, which is I'm just going to still see pornography as this super attractive thing that I want to do. It's really awesome. It's really arousing. It's really attractive, but I'm just going to white knuckle it and turn away from it. Those are usually people that continue to struggle. You have to learn to start to purge the urge, is the phrase that I would use for that. You've got to start not just staying away from pornography as a behavior, you got to start changing how you see pornography altogether. And if you do this in the right way, you can actually diminish and decrease. I'm not going to say you can make the attraction of pornography, the urge to view pornography completely go away, but it can help you get it to a level that you can manage it and that you don't turn to, right, pornography in ways that you're hoping not to. So let me give it a little example of this, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Any questions? Things I can clarify?
Go ahead. Give the example.
So, for example, one of the things people need to do when they're experiencing a strong urge to view pornography is hopefully learn to recognize they're in an urge state, right? You got to have that state awareness, right? And that right now I've just moved up a level, because most of the time they're going around saying, hey, I'm pretty good, I'm pretty committed to staying away, but now all of a sudden I'm feeling this urge. Maybe a trigger has happened, right? I'm alone, I'm in this context, I'm in a situation where I may be turning to pornography, right? One of the things you have to learn to do is recognize that urge state and learn to try to slow it down. And if you can slow it down and really think about what is it that I'm really attracted to right now. Let me share with you an example of something we use in therapy that's called guided imagery. Okay? So you actually ask someone who's struggling with pornography, envision an image of something you've seen in pornography that was once attractive to you, that you would feel drawn to. And we ask them to do three things, and it shows three types of myths that you have. The first one I'd call the "this is real" myth. So you say something like, okay, now take that image that you see. What would happen if you started to pan the camera in a 360-degree angle? And usually people that are so entrenched in the myth of pornography, it takes a minute to even think about going, I didn't even really pan the camera. It's like, oh, did you even forget there was a camera involved here? Did you forget that there was a whole production side of the camera? So as we start to pan this camera around, it's like, well, what will we see? Oh, there's a lighting stand. Oh, there's a donut table. Oh, there's a director's chair. Oh, did you forget this was choreographed? Did you forget people were pretending? Did you forget people were saying lines? That they could stop at any moment, and the level of arousal they're portraying is not what they're really experiencing? Most of us, if we admit that that's the image we have in our mind, is that full view of that, that's not quite as sexy as an image. That's not quite as attractive, right? The "this is real" myth starts to break apart. Then the next myth we might ask people to do is the "these are real people" myth. So then we'll ask them to envision that image of that woman or that thing that they're seeing in pornography and say, what do you think that woman was doing 5 minutes before they turned on the camera? Right? And they have to sort that through. What do we think's happening? What about 5 minutes after they turn off the camera? What about later that night? That really challenges us, right? Because we have to start to think about them as a whole person. And we know we can't fill in the gaps. We don't even know what their name is. I don't know where they live. What's their favorite color? What's their favorite type of ice cream? They don't know, right? We don't know. Okay. Are we as attracted to that? This isn't a real situation. This isn't a real person, right? And then the third thing we do, and usually you do this over the course of an hour, really getting people to think through the image, is then to say, replace the person in the image with somebody you know. Okay? That's your sister. That's your best friend from high school. That's somebody that you do know who they are. You can fill in the gaps. I've done this with literally dozens and dozens of individuals, right? Men over the years. And whenever we get to that point and they start to try to envision it that way, usually they get pretty emotional, right? The emotions well up for them. And I say, what are you feeling right now? And they said, if someone I knew was in that image, I want to break into it. I want to take them out of it. I want to shelter them. I'm not comfortable with people looking at my sister that way, looking at my friend, looking at the person that I love and I care about, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like, wait a minute. That person in that image may not be your sister. It may not be your best friend. It may not be your cousin, but it's somebody's, right? Why is it if it's somebody we know, it's an unattractive image that we want to end? But if it's somebody that we can fragment, we'll tell ourselves it's sexy, attractive, and arousing, right? These are what pornography doesn't want us to see. Well, we have to see the myth.
And Dr. John Fulber, University of Oklahoma.
Oklahoma State, yeah.
That's right. He talks about the fact that the more pornography dehumanizes individuals that are in it, and the more we dehumanize an individual, the more we are able to act out in ways that are very harmful or perhaps even violent against them.
Mm.
So they've done brain scans, and they found the part of the brain that lights up when men, I believe the study was done with men, when men are viewing pornography, is the part of the brain that deals with objects, not people. Again, the more we dehumanize, the more we're able to act out in very, inappropriate ways. And so what you're saying is exactly true.
Well, and here's a way to think about it. And this might sound like a little bit of a silly comparison, but I think our viewers will make sense of this. Superhero movies are super popular right now, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's, watching Thor, Avengers, Justice League kind of stuff. So imagine you're sitting with someone watching one of those movies and they're pointing out to you everything that's not real.
Yeah, it ruins it, right?
Yeah. I mean, so when they're sitting there saying, hey, Spider-Man's been fighting for 12 minutes, Aunt May's been hanging from her umbrella for 12 minutes. She's an 88-year-old woman. She couldn't even hold on for 12 seconds. That's not real. That's not real.
And I do that. I'll admit. I'll watch those
movies. Are you that guy?
Rip them apart and something like that. I'm all about like fictitious things in the realm of what could be accomplished or real. And I rip those movies apart.
You pull them apart, right? And so you're the guy that we finally want to turn to and say, shut up, Clay, right? I'm suspending reality. We tell ourselves, if I'm going to watch a show that's got wormholes opening over New York, I'm going to suspend reality here for a little bit and try to enjoy this reality. Mm-hmm. Pornography is exactly the same. Okay. You have to suspend your reality to engage in their reality for it to make. If not, you can sit with pornography the whole time and go, this isn't real. This isn't real. That doesn't happen. That wouldn't occur.
Okay, so let's say that I get it. It's not real, and I'm okay with suspending reality. Then what? I mean, what would you say to that?
And that's where we go back then to the consequences. And that's where we go back to but you and I aren't going to try to, in real life, fight aliens over New York. So it's probably okay to watch a superhero movie and say, oh, I get it. I'm never going to be having an epic battle with the Hulk, downtown. So it is truly not connected to anything in our real lives. But pornography, as we've been saying, is so connected to real relationships, to real sexuality. So in some cases, to suspend reality, to enjoy the fantasy, we have to just say, but where is it getting brought over? And again, I want to emphasize people who say, hey, it's just fantasy. People know pornography is fantasy. I would say, well, then you at least should be standing up for a reality of pornography that nobody should ever be allowed to see it till they're at least 21 years old. At least let people be adults before they could make that call. Kids don't know the difference. Young people don't know the difference. And by the time we do that all these years into adulthood, so there's consequences. There's very different consequences. And we need to think about, when do we suspend reality and when is that okay? And when do we suspend reality in ways that the myths start to harm us?
Because you're saying that if we can open our eyes to these myths, it's going to make pornography less attractive, less desirable, and therefore help us moving. I love what you said in the very beginning of this webinar. You said that the absence of darkness does not constitute the presence of light, something to that effect, right? And so, as we kind of start to recognize or pull the curtain back and see what pornography really is and what it really has to offer and what it's really leading to in our lives, not only are we going to be less attracted to that, but we're going to be more inclined to build up these more healthy, whole relationships, as we put it.
So the practical skill we're talking about, the nicotine patch of pornography, isn't a patch you can put on your arm, right? Because nicotine is a substance that goes in your body. So counteracting it with a physical substance works. Yeah. But pornography works through that interpretation of the brain. So the patch is a patch you have to put on your brain to try to then lessen the urge by saying, slow down the urge. What is it I'm attracted to? Am I even attracted to something that's real? If it's not real, am I attracted to the reality, or am I just attracted to the myth? And pornography is saying, stay in the myth, stay in the myth, stay in the myth. And the more we can stop that and learn to self-challenge that, or to get good allies. One of the things I love about Fortify is how much it encourages people and creates tools for people to engage with others. It's one of the main things that having a friend, having a parent, having a partner that's helping us with a pornography struggle is they're a reality check. Usually they come in and say, oh, let's keep this real, man. Let's see this what it really is. And is that really who you want to be? And is that really how you want to express yourself in the sexual part of life? And again, sex is a means, not an end. What do you want it? What ends do you want it to be connected to?
Yeah.
It takes practice, and I want to say that. So I don't want to make this. This is easier said than done, but in time and with practice, we can learn to pull apart the myths of pornography, see it for what it really is, and the urge goes down. We start to purge the urge.
Clean patch for porn in a sense, right?
Yeah, that's it. But it's got to go on the brain. It can't go on the body.
Right, it makes sense. So, we only have a few minutes left. I want to remind people that if they have a question, please ask it. I know that people have been answering questions just in the thread. But if you have a question specifically for Jason in the time that we have left, feel free to ask it. Now, Jason, turning back to you, we do have just a little bit of time. We could go on for a long time.
Oh, yeah. 3 days. Let's keep going.
We have a little bit of time left. What would you say to our listeners at this point? We talked about kind of breaking down the myth in a lot of ways. We talked about the result of that. What else could you say about what we've discussed so far, or anything you'd add?
One of the things I like too, and why I would encourage people, whether they're trying to prevent pornography problems or to just educate about pornography or to get out of a struggle themselves, one of the reasons why always making sure that that's connected to healthy sexuality is, I know you've heard this before, Clay, and I hear it sometimes too, is that people that are taking a stand against pornography, people will say, oh, so you're anti-sex, right? You're against sexuality. You're against, this is just the prude police that is just trying to get rid of all of that, right? And so when you tie it to, you say, no, I'm all in favor of, I'm very about a positive sexuality, but it's a sexuality to these purposes that sees people as whole people, that respects women, right? I mean, look at the culture we're in right now, all this talk, sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior, that's all stems to objectification and humanizing people too. So we can very much, that's a key of standing for something. Don't let anybody tell you that somehow to be anti-porn is to be anti-sex.
Yep.
I think nothing could be fuller. The reason why we're concerned about porn is because what it does do to healthy, fulfilling, meaningful sexual relationships that we should all be striving for and preparing ourselves for.
Yeah, one person said that quitting porn was the most sex positive thing he had ever done. And
that's a great way to say it. Great way to say it.
So here's a question from Ali Bai. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but he's asking the question: what is the best way to control an urge? What is the best way to control that?
To control an urge?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first off, let's be clear. Part of what I was talking about was actually in the moment of the urge. So I'm also a big believer in people building what's sometimes called daily rituals, right? We need to do all we can to keep ourselves in the positive motivation space. Most people struggling with pornography, 90% of the time, they're like, I don't want anything to do with it. But somehow I cascade down to that 10% of the time that I do. And then I go back to the 90% and I feel really, really bad that I was in the 10% time. So first thing I would say is it's really important to build a daily ritual that fits for you, right? For some people, that's I get up in the morning, I exercise, I read a quote, maybe Fortify becomes a part of that. I spend some time on Fortify and all the things that we do. For people of faith, sometimes they tie this to their faith practices, the things they do that helps them stay really motivated, right? They keep the picture of their wife on their laptop. They look at a picture of who they want to be, all the things that we do to keep our motivation states high, connecting with people that are our support group. So we do all of that to try to keep urges from getting to the unmanageable point. And then what we've been talking about today are really strategies that says, hey, despite all of our best efforts, we're probably still going to find ourselves in moments where we're kind of in this moment of the urge. First thing to do, acknowledge that you're in that state, right? Tell yourself, I'm feeling the urge. I'm in this moment right now. Slow things down, right? What can I do before I take action, right? Because most people start to go into automatic pilot in that moment.
Yeah. And we talk about that in the addiction cycle video. And we also have one of the strategies for those of you who are watching, which is STAR, which is a powerful way to step back, take a deep breath, a conscious breath, ask yourself what you really want, and then respond in a healthy way. So STAR is a great tool to kind of slow that down, as you're referring to, Jason.
Yeah, and so the purge the urge strategy would fit right inside of STAR, right? It's right in that slowing down and saying, wait a minute. You know, people do this that are trying to like stay to a diet, right? Maybe lose weight. It's like, oh, hey, there's that donut that I want to eat. There's that, right? Now, I'm a big advocate of donuts from time to time. But if that's something that you're trying to stay away from, usually people who learn to say, hey, I've learned a lot about what donuts really are. And they're yummy and they're tasty, but they're also this much sugar, they're this much carbs, they're this much this, they're, you know. If I slow myself down and say, do I really want to eat that? Do I really want that to be consumed? Now, I might say, hey, yeah, had a great run this morning. I do want to eat that, right? But if you're trying to stay away from pornography, you have to do the same thing. Break it down and say, what are its ingredients? What's really am I consuming here? And pornography is saying, stay at the myth. Stay at the myth. Don't peel it back. Don't look at the reality. You stay with what we're pretending to be, not with what we really are. And if you can get yourself to thinking about the reality of pornography, remember that those are real people. That is somebody's daughter. That is somebody who it has a whole full person, and you're fragmenting them and you're dehumanizing them to enjoy that. That can help you start to minimize that urge and say, what other actions can I take? What other things can I turn to so this urge, the urge passes by?
Okay, so Jason, we're about out of time. Last question, you're gonna have to answer it in 30 seconds.
All right, I love it. It's like the end of the news programs. 30 seconds.
How long does it take to overcome an addiction? Click. This is a question from Tao Tao.
Well, I'm a big believer that it's not a time, it's a process. It's a lifelong journey and process. And so it might take a shorter period of time to get away from the negative, but even a longer period to build the positive. So I would say, don't think of it, it's not like an illness. You're not trying to get a cure or fix a disease. You're trying to change a whole pattern of life, a whole way of viewing yourself, viewing others, viewing sexuality, viewing happiness. It's changing to that, and we need to stay committed to it through our entire lives.
Okay, and I want to also state that it doesn't have to take a lifetime to get to a healthy place.
Oh, no, absolutely. Maintaining that. That's a good clarification. I don't mean to say it's going to take your lifetime to get away from pornography or not use pornography. But, you know, usually what we do find is people can get an initial 3 months, an initial 6 months. Even that will greatly diminish some of the urge, some of the brain patterns that we didn't have time to spend too much time with today. But we know that even some of the brain pattern can start to slow down and can be rechanneled in ways that even 3 to 6 months later, people feel really different than they did when they started the process.
We've seen that with Fortify. Now, Jason, there's other questions here, but we've run out of time, so we're going to try to answer these. And we're going to have Jason actually come in and answer some of these questions as well. If you don't mind, Jason, we'll have you help answer some of these that are more directed to you. Thank you all for attending. It's been great to have you a part of this. Sorry for the technical issue earlier on in the process, but we got that figured out. We're going to be having these webinars every single month, a minimum of every single month with experts like Jason. We're also going to be having fortified chats where we're sharing stories and motivational insights coming from you guys. So stay tuned. Our next one is at the end of the month in November, and we'll be following that up in December with Dr. Dan Gray, who's the founder of the Lifestar Network, we're really excited to have him. So Jason, thank you so much. You've been great. A lot of insight. We're likely going to have to get you back on. I hope that's okay. We're going to
happy to. No, do it again. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Talk to you
Thanks,
later.
guys.